I'm soaring, friends. I am Vitaly Portnikov. Agentcha Bloomberg, overthrow the Russian President Putin, punishing the promises of these strikes on Ukraine for the Crimea, on the residential sector of our Ukraine, and so on the Ukrainian infrastructure for the Crimea on energy. I will still accept this Ukraine before the capitulation at the Russian-Putin summit, and with Trump, we are convinced that the American president is not ready to kick the night dough to Ukraine, and with such a rank. The hands are untied for the impression to Ukraine, and are untied, and can do evil, despite his thought, the Ukrainian nation is that. Capitulation with a single exit from the side is still on the appearance of such information so frequent propaganda games of the Russian Federation. What does it mean that Russia's strikes on Ukraine are smart, Kola? Ukrainian Hromadiyans are already richly rocky living under the mass attacks of Russian pilots. Missiles, ATPR and unmanned aerial vehicles, the eyelids have become a head tool blackmail of Russian dropped. It is obvious that they themselves will tell about the fact that Putin is ready to strike. Russia's propaganda game is often washed away by Ukrainians capitulating before such strikes are not checkity full of Ukraine. I am not crazy about a place to live in Ukraine, and so the mayor was invited by the Russian president. And I will die with a direct attack on the Ukrainian troops, for example, the territories of the Donetsk and Lugansk. Kherson as regions of Ukraine have, from Putin's point of view. There are subjects of the Russian Federation in their administrative cordons. The Russian president himself is on the destabilization of the situation in Ukraine, on the suspended conflict, on the conflict between Mish Hromadyan and Vlad, on the collapse of the Ukrainian army. It is also possible to allow Shvyd Aku to frequent the territory of Ukraine and think no longer about capitulation, but practically about the complete arrival of Ukrainian territories to the Russian Federation in the brightness of new regions. I guess you're also overestimating the political and viscose head and that of the Russian Federation at the venue of our state. On offensive Rocky? And Putin can still be a leader for the spinelessness of American President Donald Trump. It will be possible until now I am boiling blitzkrieg, 2020, another lesson the Russian president will get fucked. You actually believe that history is not a one-time argument. At times, the aggressor's army does not have operational control over the territory of Ukraine. Allegedly, it is elected to conquer. Do not lead to the surrender of such a Ukraine on a foreign territory. Effective capitulation requires effective occupation. And the very pace of Russian troops on Ukrainian territories about such an effective occupation is not allowing overgrown, he says. Girlfriend, Putin has also made a mess of the Ukrainian infrastructure, so that the Ukrainian population lived in the cold during the winter and respected for not continuing. These are such mental grounds. And this cutaneous produced, and not before the collapse of the Ukrainian state, and not before the collapse of the Ukrainian economy, and not before the snake of the solo mood of eternal surrender of the Russian Federation. Before that, it is necessary to mark, even in Eurasia, Donald Trump will continue his policy. As if helping Putin to escape to Ukraine, the European ally and our powers will help us from far away. What they have already taken away from Ukraine with a broom, to the point that the European powers themselves are in spending on prospects. Careless but in not attacking the Russians, let's say, the appearance of Russian drones on the windy just of Poland, and the 12th on the appearance of Russian weather so in Estonia, is a proof that Russian ambitions are not being filled on Ukrainian territory. Back on Pravda Ukraine, I tilki a springboard for Russia's control over Europe. And it is known that we can also talk about the fact that the Europeans beat such control and such attacks. However, at times according to the Rossky of Ukraine at the Russian-Ukrainian Vienna, at times the narthex of the Ukrainian power to the territory of Russia to the satellite power of the Russian Federation. The European fear Tilka with geometric progression, so that non-European powers will extremely help Ukraine at times to bring down Putin's attacks. Well, do not forget that Ukraine has seen a lot of such attacks. Let's rise up an hour later, the Russian Federation literally has its own enterprises on the self-defense. And drones are flying in to repair the workshop of enterprises of that time. It is clear that shooting down Ukrainian drones on the Kiev automatically means more serious spending in the energy complex of the Russian Federation. Even their chaga will be seriously given signs in the camp of the Russian budget. And in the Russian Federation they are also conducting their aggressive war at the Rocky River. So I have also seen Ukraine on the terrorist attack of the Russian Federation with power strikes on the Russian energy sector, on the viscose parts of the Russian Federation, on the viscose fishing complex of aggressive Ukraine, on richly effective ideas, not sanctions, and extremely not for the president with those received in the state. In order for the script to be written, I am Agentcha Bloomberg, Nevid buffs. Putin is also not significant, and his attacks on our power are extremely necessary. So that the Russian president, when hiring for offensive missions and Rocky, does not have to get financial, visceral and economical. Yaki demographic potential to continue the tan of guilt against Ukraine, the moment can germinate in the tan of guilt against Europe, and the yak legacy of the Third Light War is crazy and catastrophes, and such on the European, and Tilka on the European continent. So we're talking is the key to completion of the Russian-Ukrainian guilt, continuing to find Ukani Putin. The key and the primus of the Russian president the speed of the status, overestimated, and in the hands of the dropped forces of Ukraine, and in the hands of our Western allies. The scale of the catastrophe is gone, the yak with the shyness of an express rush to the European continent when hiring for Ukraine. The yaks are in the construction of proximity to Ukraine and the Russian Federation, to the theater of combat actions. The greatest guilt in Europe 4 parts of 1945th rock. Diakuyu. Finish on the topic channel, subscribe to it, subscribe to the social on the Patreon channel. It helps to develop these resources. Sponsorship functions.